all racists are hypocrites. Before you get too comfortable in your own seat, you are a racist, and you too are a hypocrite, I bet. Anyway, everybody is racist. By that I mean elitist and groupist. So you don't have to hate people because they're black or white or yellow. If you love to belong in groups and you love labels, then by definition you're infected with the virus of elitism, and ultimately it manifests as racism. If you give yourself time and the circumstances are right, remember this is evolution, we're talking about the genes that you have in your mind, and then it is selected by your environment. So the timing is very important. I'm talking about racism from the viewpoint of evolution, so we have to be very careful because it applies very much so. The human arena is no different than the Serengeti where the animals live. It's just that we've never really thought about it because evolution has been taught to us as if it's a story that doesn't apply to us. It applies to pigs and zebras and lions. Unfortunately, it applies much more to us because we are far more accelerated, and therefore the consequences are far more accelerated. We love elitism and segregation, all of us do, by any and all means possible, even when there are none. When there's no justification, we find one. The classic good example of this is the Easter Islanders, who a single shipload of people, probably a single family went in there at some point, and eventually, even though they looked exactly the same, they wanted to be different, and they had to come up with two different tribes. And so they, one of them made their ears longer. So even when we don't have any differences, we want to make them. And there is a reason for this, because like in the previous one, I showed you about the sacrificial population. If you haven't looked at it, please have a look, because that's important. It is a very valuable evolutionary position. So racism and elitism is simply a choice. It is not written in your DNA, because genetically we're identical. What our belief system makes us elitist and racist, and that is of course a choice, because we can change those genes, the cerebral genes. And if you'd forgotten, this is an extract from the last video. We have all kinds of elitism and elitist groupings and labels, economic classification, worker, management, owner, shareholder, all hierarchical, all different, all different classes of animals, if you like, different species of animals, ethnic labeling, African American, Latin American, Asian American, religious labeling, Jewish British, Muslim British, Christian, label. By the way, the British cancelled each other out. It means nothing. So ultimately you're really left with African, Latin and Asian, different species that don't want to be united. The only way you can unite them is to find them a common enemy, and then everybody gets united, of course. Take away the enemy and they'll start fighting each other, because that is the nature of elitism. You have intellectual label, professor, doctor, cleaning lady, janitor, bin collector, etc. All hierarchies, actually showing a gradient in the food chain. And responsibility label, spiritual leader, first lady, prime minister. I mean, just look at it, alpha dog, it's the same thing. It's basically constant segregation. Racism is not one-sided. This is a terrible mistake that everybody makes, especially those who think that they are victims of racism, because they constantly look outside, they don't look at themselves. It is never one-sided. It is always perpetuated by both sides, because it's inevitable. You cannot segregate a group from your own group and for that not to be a group. Think about that for a moment. By default, they become a group. And as you subjugate them, as you torment them, they become stronger and stronger in defending themselves, in being cornered, and that becomes a whirlwind, and the two basically power each other. So it actually powers itself, if you know what I mean. The segregation becomes more powerful and more self-reinforcing. So the hypocrisy of only the powerful being a racist is a nonsense. Everybody is a racist. I'll prove to you. I mean, imagine these people here. They think they're better than these people, obviously, because they're sluts. It's debatable. I'm not saying all Western people are like, but that has become a part of the Western culture, an extreme part of it, where women are, living in a man's world now, because for them, in order to be celebrated, they have to behave like men. Sexual promiscuity and aggression and beating each other together in rings and so on and so forth. But if you are going to kill your daughters if they marry a son here, then that makes you a racist. I mean, it should be clear as daylight. They are not just racist opposite you. You, by maintaining this difference and constantly reinforcing it and celebrating it on and on and on, and challenging these other people overtly, as you'll see later on, are perpetuating racism yourself. Elitism occurs on both sides, and this needs to be seen by everybody. Every group, if they want to perpetuate it, then by all means knock yourself out. But this one-sided approach is what really screws up societies. I mean, especially at this moment in Britain, where even the government is blind to this double racism. They constantly keep going with the woke idea of the poor Muslims, the poor blacks, the poor browns being persecuted, while they cannot see the racism from the other side, which is challenging, overtly challenging these people here. So if you look at this, the hypocrisy of racism is actually nothing, for me, proves the stupidity of racism better than this hypocrisy, which is something that they don't seem to realize. And that's amazing to me, because this guy here is this bonehead, Mr. Jihadi here. He loves bread, but he hates baking. He wants this, but he hates this guy here. What do I mean by that? All racist and elitist species of humans are dumb shits. Why? Because they're hypocrites. They lie to themselves, or they're so stupid they don't even realize it. Now, you think about this guy here. He did not invent the motor car or the internal combustion engine. His father invented, there is no Ford Abdul or something like that. He is usurping this man, the white man's culture, because your culture is not just in what you eat and how you dress. Your technology is very much part of your culture. So basically, when he gets shot or he gets ill or his children get ill, where does he go? He doesn't go to the mosque and prays to God to sort him out. He goes to the doctor. And where did the modern medicine come from? Where did surgery come from? They are entirely white people's culture. So taking and usurping white man's culture in this respect is perfectly fine. It's not haram. By the way, there's another, almost the Jews, the Christians and so on, all of them are hypocrites, because you should never go to a doctor because he has acquired his skills by dissecting human bodies. I mean, you have to understand physiology and morphology and anatomy. So where did that come from? All of those are considered by religious people to be sacrilegious, because you're messing about with God's systems and you can't touch that. You know, abortion, all the rest of the nonsense that goes with it. And yet they're perfectly happy to go to a doctor, go to a hospital, and he likes to blow things up, this idiot. So obviously, where did he get that from? It's not his technology. Chemistry is not something that came from the East, especially not the modern chemistry. There may have been some bullshit alchemy or something in the past, but the modern chemistry is not part of his. He has Kalashnikovs, guns, rocket launchers, all of these things. The only thing actually that he can justifiably carry is that little knife there. Everything else is Western culture. It comes from science. It comes from a specific way of thinking, which is freedom of thinking, which is freedom of freedom and being away from dogma, so that you can think, so you can question things and be able to question them without, having your legs and arms chopped off. He watches television. He didn't invent it. He uses microwave. He had nothing to do with it. And he uses smartphones especially to blow things up. Has nothing to do with it. My point is, he's a hypocrite. He embraces everything to do with the Western white man's culture, and yet for some reason, why does he want to destroy it? It has nothing to do with equality. It's because he wants power. It is always power, power, power. Equality is a nonsense. As you see, Nietzsche he hit the nail right on the head. Is that the equality is the weak usurping power. It's all false morals. It doesn't mean anything. So technology is an inherent part of a culture. In fact, we define civilizations through their technologies, because we have never really had, our humanity's never changed. So when we're talking about different civilizations, the Roman civilization and road building and all that, what we really mean are their technologies. We judge all civilizations that way. Now, if you look at this guy here, who uses an eagle or a bird of prey now to hunt, or a bow and arrow when you have these guns? Where did they come from? They came from these people. Who goes to the juju man and with some bullshit ceremony instead of going to a doctor? Every single person on this earth has realized that this is where the solution to the problems lie. Do we send smoke signals anymore? Does anybody? Well, the answer is no, because we use these. So why, excuse me, why are we so easy in adopting cultures that empower us, but we reject the humanity side of it? Why do we want to retain, is my point, this separation, while in fact we are united? I mean, just look at it. We're all using the same thing. Anyway, so speciation, it seems to be inherent in us. We can't get away from it. And the best example, and again, I have nothing against the Jews, so please don't misunderstand this. I'm using this example because you will understand it better. Most people will understand this better, because it's a very clear example of an elite group of people who have maintained their elite nature and segregation as a species of humans throughout history. So why are Jews still Jews, despite all of the historic evidence of their perpetual victimization, pain and suffering and tragedy? Tragedy at an insane level. Why would you still want to be this? I mean, if you try to rationalize this means that if you keep making yourself mushroom soup over and over again, and every time you make it, you get serious diarrhea, at some point, are you going to realize, why am I doing this? Maybe I should stop eating these mushrooms. But yet, they do it, and yet all of us do it, by the way. This is nothing new. I mean, if you look around yourself right now in Europe and in America, the Muslims are the new Jews. These are the new small middlemen minorities that have established themselves there and are becoming very seriously and in a very accelerated way alienated from the populations that live there. So conscious speciation is a choice. It's not written in your DNA from both sides. They both perpetuate racism through choice. It is not real, obviously. There is no gene, for example, to be a Jew. There is no gene in your DNA that makes you a Muslim. You're not born a Muslim or a Jew. You're made to be one of those. So why do we gravitate to separation and not unification? I discussed it before, which was the advantages, if you like, of racism, because, you know, please see the video before this, but it is written in our DNA because it works. This segregation is an inherent part of DNA producing spare parts that then it can bang together through violence and DNA tragedy. Again, see the videos before, please, if you don't understand what those words mean. And the blind watchmaker assembles this watch through this mechanism, because there is no other mechanism. So we have, I just want to dwell on this a little bit so you can see what I mean by constructive and destructive alienation. It's all the same, it's just one is faster than the other one. This is a picture of a Jewish family that I think sometime in the 1940s, where they were made to wear these yellow stars. I want you to have a good look at these people and have a, you know, see what you see. To me, they look exactly the same as anybody else in Europe. They were well integrated. They wear the same clothes. They probably could speak the language much better than the locals, because they were very well educated. Because by that point, for reasons that are beyond here, the Jewish culture had become extremely productive. That's why, even in the modern world, some of the biggest portion of Nobel Prize winners are Jews. Some of the most successful people on this planet are all Jews. This is inherent part of their culture. It's not anything to do with their genes. Well, I don't think it is, but they might, you know, disagree. But overall, they were very productive in their culture. So they were very well integrated. They're paying their taxes. They're doing all of the things right, although they maintained their segregation through sexual segregation and through elitism. But in every other way, they were well and truly integrated. They never went into the streets, or I don't know of any instances where they challenged the Germans, the Poles, and everybody else in their country and said, we want you to become Jews. We don't like this shit that you've got, you know, going here, and overtly challenging them for space and for authority and for power. That never happened. And yet, look at what happened to these guys in the Holocaust. Now compare these people here. Through the British legal system and through the freedom of speech, this guy can stand there and openly challenge the British people for territoriality. Now, one of the most important things that nobody seems to, especially the idiots who, the amateur idiots who are our leaders, is because they don't really understand it. Anybody can become a political leader, and we seem to be very happy about this. In America or in Great Britain, any idiot can become the Prime Minister, and we say that as if it's a good thing. And of course it isn't, because if you, to become a doctor, we send our children for at least 7 years, plus a whole load, maybe 3 or 4 other years to practice before we can allow them to prescribe an aspirin. But any moron can become a politician and then go about making changes that affect millions of people's lives. They don't understand anything about human psychology. They understand nothing about evolution, and so they don't understand what territoriality means and how aggressive it is, and what are the consequences of this, of openly challenging the indigenous population. This is like the hyena running around in front of the leopards and pissing all over his territory to mark his own territory, and it's an extremely aggressive challenge to the local population. In fact, it's not even hiding it. Look, migrants in the UK protest demanding implementation of Sharia law. They are blocking a road, and increasingly both in the Western world, in Europe and in America, they seem to be a bunch of idiots who are telling everybody else that we should take the space. They block the road because they want to pray. In most Islamic countries, this never happened, because if you want to pray, you plan your life better. You go to a mosque, you go to a park, you go somewhere else. Nobody ever just goes around, blocking the motorway traffic because you want to pray. How desperate is that? Why does it have to be so desperate? Why can't you plan it? Well, the answer is you can, but this is making a statement. We are here and we are powerful and we demand territory. And you can see the consequences of what that's going to be in the minds of everybody else. Like these people, through doing almost no harm overtly, and look at what happened to them. But these guys, because they've been given this false sense of power through the legal system, none of them have any power. This is not power at all. This is just false power through the legal system, are going around overtly dressing up in these clothes, walking around in Europe, I'm making no moral judgment. I'm just saying to you from the viewpoint of evolution what this implies. If we don't understand this open challenging and the consequences, then we have learned nothing from the Holocaust. All of the nonsense that we stand there, put flowers, 10-minute silence is bullshit. We understand nothing because we keep repeating the same processes that gave rise to this incredible tragedy. So the reason why we do this, and nobody puts it better than this guy, and as I keep saying to you, if you followed some of these videos, he is amazing. He is the most bravest philosopher that's ever existed, apart from Socrates. But he is absolutely right, and but his philosophy is very, very uncomfortable to look at, especially if you're a woke person, because what he is saying, and he's absolutely right, stability is stagnation, and stagnation is death. So evolution doesn't like this. It doesn't like to be stable, because it knows eventually it'll be wiped out. Sharks apparently have been sharks for 50 million years, and people congratulate them that they're amazing creatures, but they're dumb shits. They'll die. As soon as one thing happens that they have no immunity for, or they're not prepared for, they will be wiped out because they didn't go anywhere. They just sat there. That's a dead end in evolution. So tragedy is rejuvenating when things stagnate. He has no problem with tragedy, and he sees tragedy as something like a fire that goes through the jungle and burns dead wood to make room for new growth. And unfortunately, if you are stupid enough to have conscious selection, but you prefer irresistible selection by subjugating your intelligence to your fears and cravings, then this is inevitable. This tragedy is inevitable, and that's why we have a cyclical system of tragedies over and over again throughout history. So are we doomed per se? I think so, yes, because if you look at all of these things, why are the black American children not dressing up like that? Why do they choose to dress like this? Why? I mean, a lot of people say, well, why not? They're celebrating their African culture. Well, with all due respect, this is not African culture. This is a made-up culture. Africans don't dress up like this in Africa. I've been all over Africa. Most Africans that go to university dress like that. They become doctors, they become engineers, they become politicians. They all wear these clothes because this has become a symbol. Whether you like it or not, it's not the point. But in the same way that a doctor wears scrubs, this has become the symbol and the uniform of a certain mentality, that everybody universally accept. The Chinese wear it, the Japanese wear it. The Japanese don't wear kimonos anymore to go to meetings, and in fact Donald Trump got really upset because Zelensky didn't wear this, if you see what I mean. But anyway, the point I'm making is that this is a choice. Why is it a choice? Why are these people rejecting this culture, and why do they want to be separate? They want to flaunt that separation, and they want to perpetuate it. So do these people, and so do these people. And I'm just using some of the examples, but everybody else is the same. These small groups that remain there, and they perpetuate these differences, and they want to be different. The idea is they do not want to be equal. Get this through your head. Nobody wants to be equal. People want more power. If you have no power at all, from zero, and somebody's got 100% power, then equality is a very, very good and very fast way for you to usurp power. At least you get 50% before you have to fight for it. So all of these false morals are basically there just to usurp power. They all have the same technology preferences, by the way. Everybody uses the smartphones, like I said to you before, but why do they want to be constantly different? So racism, a choice perpetuated by both sides. As you can see, the fact that they make that choice to be different, to be black, to be proud to be black, whatever that means. They don't want to be white. They don't want to have anything to do with white people. They just want more power. That is the point I'm making. And this is not equality. This is overt aggression and competition between two groups. I'm making no judgment. If the black people want to do this, by all means, just carry on. But you have to understand what you're doing. And everybody else needs to understand what is happening here, because this is not harmonization of a society. This is overt competition, teamwork, team competition. Because the problem is that both of them think they can get the freezer. Because they want the power, their leaders, especially the idiots who keep pushing them to become different, so they can lead them, obviously, is that they want more and more power because they think they can get more and power from them. Remember, I said these guys were the freezer for them to rejuvenate themselves by taking everything they had, including their property, including all of their savings, their homes, and in fact their labor, forced labor to run their machines and the war machine. So the point here is the will to power is inevitable, and this is again Nietzsche, because everybody wants to be powerful, nobody wants to be equal. So don't make that mistake. Equality is just a means to an end, and this is because of our genes. Our genes are really in charge, and we just kind of addicts running around. So the quest for equality itself is racist, because power gifted through law is no power at all. This is the most dangerous thing in any society, that especially middlemen minorities should understand very, very clearly, and their leaders should understand it and explain it to them, that going around flexing your muscles when you don't really have muscles, because you have not taken this power. This power was gifted to you by the white people that live there. Through their laws, they have stopped themselves from persecuting you, from harming you, because they made those laws. They can change them, as Hitler did when he came to power, and immediately the Jews went from being citizens of Europe or citizens of Germany to becoming their enemies. Just like that, overnight. And that can happen anywhere, and there is nothing any of us can do about it, because if they change their mind, they're in the majority, they have all the weapons, they have all the army, etc., etc. There is nothing we can do about it. Okay, a few thousand tough guys might die, but the rest of us would just march into the ghettos like sheep. So the Jews were not stupid, they weren't cowards, they just had no power, and people who have no power will do as they're compelled. It's as simple as that, or they die. So equality is the weak usurping power, not true harmony. There is no harmony going on there, and as you will see in a minute, because it's destructive to everybody. The will to power is universal. No one wants to be equal. We all want to be in charge of making choices. I believe that to be an absolute truth. And you need to think about this, because if you don't believe it, then there's no point in you looking at these things. Nobody wants to be. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by this, and it's a very clear example, I think. The example of South Africa. South Africa was an apartheid state ruled by a minority of white people, and the majority of the black was subjugated. It was one of the richest countries. It actually had nuclear weapons, believe it or not. So it's not just an ordinary African country. It was very well developed. It had a lot going for it, but it had inherently this injustice where the great majority had no power at all, and they were segregated. Nelson Mandela, by all accounts, a great guy. He did a lot to push the cause of so he calls equality, and eventually he was released and he became the president. And these are queues and queues of millions of people of black people who went to the vote to vote for, and overwhelmingly they voted for ANC and him, of course. My point is this: that even a single black person in these queues in Africa consider voting for a white man. Why not? Because the white people had the experience in the government. Now let's assume that the white people, remember, this was the white people deciding to give the power back. They released him and they nullified apartheid. It wasn't the blacks that won, because for years and years they were subjugated. So again, don't make a mistake that the blacks got weapons and they went and killed all the white people. It was a compromise reached through peaceful means. Now, at that point, did any black person actually think about voting for a white man because he was the right person for the job? Very unlikely, I don't think, because that's not what we do. People voted for him because he was black, obviously. And whether he wanted equality or power, I don't really know. But the results showed that he either wanted power or that his motive was naive, because look at the results. Because if he thought that he was going to bring harmony, he was badly mistaken, because democracy equals majority, and in this particular case, it would be the power transition to the black people, and not equality of sagacity. That's the important point, because remember, the problems in a society do not depend on power, they depend on wisdom. And there's Socrates. I mean, we later on we'll come to this, of who Socrates really was. He was not a philosopher, he was a politician, and that's why he was assassinated, because he was it's all about this. If you don't know what the right choices are, then don't make it. So the ballot box is inherently a democratic failure, because it provides power. It says nothing about right and wrong. So my point here was that this is what happened. So as a result of this, despite Africa being a very rich country, it is now almost broken. By all means, you don't accept mine, go and have a look at YouTube and all of the videos recently about South Africa and how all of its systems are broken. Corruption is rife, crime is all over the place, drugs everywhere. Nothing's happened, and you can see quite clearly that the plight of the average black man is no different or no better than it was under apartheid. Some might argue that in fact it was better. I don't know, but it certainly isn't the promised paradise of blacks taking over and the black lives improving and everybody living in this wonderful paradise because South Africa is in theory rich enough to make that possible. So the empowerment of blacks became the winning team, which is what everywhere, if you look at it, I mean, America is no different, Britain is no different. Nobody votes for any principles. Everybody has become territorial and they vote for the winning team. They pick a horse and they back that horse and they don't even know what the hell they're voting for. They actually vote in poachers as gamekeepers. You vote in and you bring a capitalist cutthroat to run your country. What do you think you're going to get from it? If you think he's going to make deals for you, you're an idiot, because he's going to fill his own pockets. He doesn't care about you. Because he's a capitalist. That's the whole point. He's not been brought up to be socially aware. He's aware of himself only. So nepotism and job allocations followed this winning team. The blacks win because of the ballot box, and guess what? Can Mandela now keep a lot of white people in the job because they're the right people? He probably tried, but ultimately he would fail because the blacks wouldn't accept it. Now they've taken over, they want the jobs. Obviously, they want it, regardless of whether they can do it or not, because, well, what is power if you can't have the job? So this then gives rise to corruption, bad investments, overpayments. If you look at the videos, like I said to you, I'm not going to detail them here, but you'll see that the whole thing's a mess. There's the cousins and people who are in charge of buying are also in charge of selling, and it's just a madness. All the typical corruption of the third world, of nepotism, are there in abundance. And so we have broken institutions and the final looting of feeding on the carcass, like a kind of eating frenzy. So my point is this, that true revolutions never work, because what is a revolution? A revolution is taking a complex system and breaking it into spare parts, like taking a reasonably assembled watch, and you break it into a parts and you throw it up in the air hoping that it will recombine in such a way that you'll get a better watch. Now, you have to be insane to think that. It never does. It almost always goes the other way, because the people who had the least amount of power, who now have the most power, will go crazy. They're like fox in the chicken house, in a hen house. They're just going to gorge themselves. And this is what always happens. Only through evolution can we maintain and improve complexity. So you have to maintain what you already have and build on top of it, which is what should have happened in South Africa. Keep the white people in the job, because they are the right people. Why are you even seeing white anymore? Because once you say we are now equal, then white and black goes out of the way. And what really then matters is the true equality in a state, in a congregation, means eligibility. That is when you truly go for equality, when you are no longer color conscious. And one of the most important things, the most important thing that's ever been said about racism, which actually says exactly that, because every other anti-racist leader, if you like, is a hypocrite. They all want power, with the exception of one guy, and that guy, I don't know about his motive, but his statement makes sense. Is Martin Luther King, who said that one day my people will be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Please pay attention to this sentence, because it's an incredible sentence. What Martin Luther King says is he doesn't see black anymore. He doesn't want anybody to see black anymore. He doesn't want to see white anymore. He doesn't want to see any of those things. He just wants to see the cerebral genes, people's thoughts. What does that mean? That's eligibility. If you are not a good doctor, then don't be a bloody doctor just because you're the cousin of the Prime Minister. If you're not a good engineer, don't be one. That is true equality within a state, within a congregation. Eligibility for the job, eligibility for the position. Forget about power. And this is the man who 2,500 years ago was preaching exactly that. Now, please pay attention to him. I'll discuss him later, because if you don't know him, then you might as well throw up your arms. You're never going to understand anything. You won't understand who you are. You don't understand what the modern world is, or anything. So how can you call, just take a moment and savor the beauty of this sentence. How can you call someone powerful if the choices he makes hurt him? For him, power doesn't mean muscles. It doesn't mean guns. It doesn't mean lots and lots of idiots running around the streets chanting. It means the quality of the choices. There is no point in having the power to make a choice if you do not understand what the right choice is. It seems so damn obvious, doesn't it, when you read it like that? It should be so obvious that it's insulting for me to put it there, and yet no one understands it, no one cares about it. All these idiots all over the place are to be in charge of making decisions, because all they want is to have the most and fill their own pockets. It's got nothing to do with creating a better world, and of course you can't create it without this man. So the toxicity of democracy, you have to understand, because democracy is a nonsense. I know you probably disagree with this, because with all due respect, I don't think you really thought about it. If you think about it, democracy cannot withstand even the most superficial of re-examinations, and this is well known. This has been well known for everybody, for throughout history, that all three of the greatest Western philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, were all vehemently against democracy, and they lived it. They were there. They saw the whole thing, and they saw what it could do, and yet no one seems to care about. Even now, idiots are running around saying that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, democracy, this, democracy, that, and yet it is the most toxic form of government you could possibly imagine, because it is based on power. It is not, again, because we're not educated properly. You probably don't know this word here, demosophy. You don't know what that word means. What made Athens great was not democracy. It was actually demosophy. Of the two twins, I like to call them a conjoined twins that were born in Athens in the 7th century BC at the time of Solon. And the firstborn was demosophy. It was born out of Solon's eunomia. I will explain this later in socionomy, if I ever get round to it. It's not part of this thing, but it is extremely important. This is what we should be teaching our children so they understand what the hell the world is, where they come from. And democracy is a mob rule. When Socrates was assassinated or killed by the Athenians, it was exactly this. The Athenians had turned into these dickheads here, woke. They were the mob that was the cancelled culture. Socrates was literally cancelled, but cancelled in an extreme way of being killed. So there's no difference. The woke mentality was very much at the end of the Athenian civilization, which should tell you something about our civilization, where we are now, if we keep going kind of blindly at this. It destroyed Athens and it assassinated him. And if you don't understand the history of those things, then with all due respect, you should, because you should not talk about democracy if you don't understand that. And if you don't understand the birth of demosophy, you don't understand Solon, you don't understand eunomia, then whatever you say is going to be just an opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong, but at best it's just a lucky guess. So you need to understand Hellenic Athens, you need to understand Solon, you need to understand eunomia, and the birth of demosophy and its erosion into democracy. Anyway, that was just the hypocrisy about racism that is perpetuated by both ends, and it's stupid. Anyway, I hope I made that point. If you need a complete and systematic explanation of these points, please get this book free of charge. I don't want anything from you. As per Socrates, if we don't examine our lives, we're not living a human life. We're just living an accelerated animal life, which is, if you actually look at it, that is, in my view, precisely what we're living in. We don't care about any humanity. All we care about is more, faster, faster, faster. And we're full of opinions. Apparently, they seem to think that opinions are important. I'm afraid opinions are nothing. If you can't make judgments, rational judgments, then every idiot's full of opinions and they mean nothing. And our education system, if I've said anything here that has made you think about why our education system fails, it is a business, and it just prepares us to be cogs in the big machine of industry. It doesn't prepare us as human beings to live in a congregation that's harmonious or eunomic. Anyway, thanks.